This is lesson 6, graphing systems of inequalities. So yesterday we looked at just how to graph an inequality. Today we're looking at a system. So we're looking at two inequalities and we're going to find the solution with our system. So yesterday we also talked about the solution to an inequality is in the shaded area. The solution to a system of inequalities is found in the cross-section of the shaded areas. So we're looking at the cross-section of the shaded areas. There's going to be one shaded area from the first equation and then another shaded area from the second. And where those two areas intersect or where they cross, that's where our solution to the system will be. So let's look at our first example here. We have two inequalities and we're going to make sure they're solved for y and then graph them on this graph here. So our first inequality says 3x plus y is greater than -1. So this is not solved for y, so we're going to have to do that. To solve this for y, we're going to have to move the 3x first. So we're going to subtract 3x from both sides. And we get y is greater than -3x minus 1. Since the coefficient of y here is just a 1, we can stop here because y is by itself. So now it is in that slope-intercept form. So let's find the slope of this inequality. So the slope is the coefficient of x. It's what's in front of the x, which is a -3. Okay, and then I always put this over 1 to make it look like a fraction. This way I have rise over run, and I can see the direction that our line will be moving. So since this is negative, we're going to go down 3 to the right 1. Now let's look at our y-intercept, which is the b value. So b is going to be this -1. So just like we did yesterday, we are going to put this inequality on the graph. So let's start with the b value, the beginning point. Our y-intercept is -1, so we're going to put a point where y is -1 on the y-axis here. Then we're going to use our slope, -3 over 1, and we're going to go down 3 to the right 1 and plot a point. Down 3 to the right 1, plot a point. Down 3 to the right 1, plot a point. So now we have some points graphed, and let's look at the inequality sign we have here. So our inequality sign is a greater than sign. So if you remember, since this is a greater than sign, we are going to have a dotted line. So this is going to be a dotted line throughout this graph. And then we are going to shade above this line. So that would look like this, shading above this line. So that's our first inequality. Now let's look at our second one. We have y is greater than x plus 3. So this one is already solved for y. So let's just go ahead and find our slope and y-intercept. So the slope, or m, is going to be that coefficient of x. When we don't see a number in front of x, we know there's a 1 there. So our slope is 1. And then to make this look like a fraction for rise over run, I'm going to put it over 1. And since it's positive, the direction it's going is up 1 to the right 1. Then our b value is 3. Okay, so let's go ahead and put this on our graph as well. So we start with the b value, which is the y-intercept, and that point would be right here on the y-axis, where y is 3. And then we'll use our slope for direction, so we go up 1 to the right 1, plot a point, up 1, right 1, plot a point, up 1, right 1, plot a point, and we'll do one more. up one, right one, plot a point. So here are some points plotted on the graph, and we again go and look at the inequality sign. So this inequality sign is greater than as well. So since it doesn't have that line underneath the sign, we know it's again a dotted line. We have a dotted line here. And then we are going to be shading above this line because it's greater than. So we want all the points above the line. So that'll look like this. So now notice that we have a section here shaded just green, a section shaded just blue, and then we have a section that's shaded both green and blue. So this right here is that cross section I was telling you about, where there is green and blue happening. Okay? So when we want the solution to the inequality, that would be the solution to the system of inequalities, that would be any point in the cross section of the shaded areas. So for example, the point 1, 8 is right here. That would be a solution to the system because it's in the cross section of the shaded areas. So notice that it's nice if we use different colors or even just different directions of shading. So if you shade two different directions, then you can see where they cross. Okay, so an example of a non-solution would just be any point that is not in that cross section. So this point can be anywhere in this red area, okay, where it's just blue, just green, or blank, any point. So a point that's not a solution would be like -3, -4, okay, because it's not in that cross section. -3, -4 is not a solution to the system. All right, let's look at our next example. So our first problem here is y is less than -2x plus 3. Since this problem has already been solved for y, let's go ahead and find our slope and y-intercept. So our slope here would be -2. And I'm going to go ahead and put this over 1 to make it a fraction. Okay, so the direction that our slope is going, we look at this negative sign, and that means we're going down 2 and then to the right 1. Down 2 and to the right 1. And then our b value, that's going to be this 3. That's the y-intercept. So let's put this y-intercept on the graph. So where y is 3 on the y-axis, I'm going to put a point. And then I use my slope for direction. So I'm going to go down 2 to the right 1, plot a point. Down 2 to the right 1, plot a point. Down 2 to the right 1, plot a point. Down 2 to the right 1, plot a point. So we get the idea here. Okay, so here are some points plotted. Now let's look at that inequality sign. So we have a less than sign. Less than means we are going to have a dotted line and we're shading under the line. If it's a dotted line, that looks like this. And we're going to go up this way and make sure you extend the line throughout the graph. So now we can go ahead and shade. So again, we're shading underneath this line. So that would look like this. This would be below the line. And shade all in the same direction if you're using the same color. So now we've finished our first inequality. Let's look at the next one. All right. So this next one is 2x plus 3y is greater than negative 3. And it's not solved for y, so we're going to have to solve it for y. To do that, we want to move the x. So I want to subtract 2x from both sides. That leaves me with 3y on the left is greater than negative 2x minus 3. After you move the x term, we divide by the coefficient of y. So I will divide by 3 on both sides. And we get y is greater than. And now we can simplify this fraction here. So I'm going to use that heart method. So negative 2x divided by 3 actually doesn't simplify anymore. So we just leave it as negative 2 over 3x. And then we do negative 3 divided by positive 3, which is negative 1. So that we have this in slope-intercept form. So let's look at our slope here, which is negative 2 over 3. The direction it's moving, since we have a negative 2, is down 2 to the right 3. And our b value, which is our y-intercept, is negative 1. So now we can put this on the graph. I'm going to put negative 1 on the y-axis here, because that's my b value. And then I'm going to move down 2 to the right 3 and plot a point. Down 2 to the right 3, plot a point. Down 2 to the right 3, plot a point. Okay, so let's look at that inequality sign for this one. We have a greater than sign here, so that means we are going to have another dotted line. But this time we are shading over that line. Okay, so let's go ahead and draw out that dotted line here. Okay, so there's my line, and then I'm going to shade over this green line here. All right, so it should look like that. And now we want to look at what a solution would look like with this system. Again, the solution to a system of inequalities is going to be in that cross section where we see the blue and the green shaded together. Okay, so that would be right in this area here. So for example, a solution to this system would be the point negative 5, 6, which would be right about here. So a solution would be negative 5, 6. A non-solution, which again is anything that's not in that cross section, would be something like 6, 3. Even though it's in the green shaded area, it's not in the green and blue shaded area, and that's where we want our solutions to be. So 6, 3 is not a solution. All right, so this is going to be our last problem here. The first inequality is 4x plus y is greater than 2. Since that is not solved for y, we will have to solve for y here. So first I move that x term. I'm going to subtract 4x from both sides. And I get y is greater than negative 4x plus 2. And y is by itself here, so I do not have to divide by the coefficient of y. So it's already in slope-intercept form, so let's find what that slope is. My slope here is going to be negative 4. And to make it look like a fraction, I'll put it over 1. So the direction we're going here is down 4 to the right 1. My b value is 2. And remember that b value is the y-intercept. So let's put a point on the y-axis where we see 2. So here's our point. And the slope is telling us the direction we move. So we're going to go down 4 to the right 1, plot a point. Down 4 to the right 1, plot a point. Down 4 to the right 1, plot a point. So look at our inequality sign so that we can know how to draw our line and where to shade. So since this is a greater than sign, again, we're going to have another dotted line. And we're going to shade over the line. So our dotted line would look like this. And then when we shade over the line, that would be on this side of it. All right, so now we have our last inequality. Y is less than or equal to x minus 3. So this one is already solved for y. So we can just go ahead and find that slope and the y-intercept. So our slope here is again going to be 1 because we don't see a number in front of x. We know there's a 1 there. And I'm going to put this over 1 to make it look like a fraction. And putting it over 1 does not change its value at all. Since it's positive, the direction we're moving is up 1 to the right 1. Then our b value is going to be that negative 3. So that's our y-intercept. So we'll start there. Let's plot the y-intercept, negative 3. So on the y-axis, here's our first point. And then we're going to go up 1 to the right 1 and plot a point, up and right. Up 1, right 1, up 1, right 1. We can keep going for a while there. All right, so this line, we got to decide what type of line we want. So we're again going to look at that inequality sign. So the inequality sign is less than or equal to. When it has that equal to, that means we have a solid line. And we're going to shade under because it's less than. So our solid line means just a straight line through the points. Make sure you extend throughout the graph. And then we're going to shade underneath this line. All right, so let's look at some solutions and non-solutions. Again, the solution is in the cross-section of the two shaded areas. So for example, a solution to the system would be the point 6, negative 3. So this point is in where we see the blue and the green shaded areas. 6, negative 3. An example of something that's not a solution. That would be the point negative 5, 2. That point is not in that cross section. So negative 5, 2. All right, so just again, the solution to a system of inequalities would be any point that is in the area where both lines have shaded. So anywhere in this darker area. So that's how we find solutions to our systems of inequalities.